Introduction to Folding and Layout of Fabric. It is essential to analyze the fabric properly to decide whether to use the lengthwise or widthwise grain before we can actually start drafting. We will also need to fold the fabric as per drafting instructions. At the end of the session, you will be able to use fabric as per lengthwise or widthwise grain, identify the various ways in which fabric is folded before drafting the pattern. Layout means how fabric is used when drafting the different pattern pieces to make a garment. There are two things we have to consider. One is the width of the fabric, and the other is the print or weaving design of the same. As you can see in this fabric here, the design is along the length of the fabric. In this case, however, layout will depend on the width of the fabric as it does not have design. The width of fabric is in a 90-degree angle to the selvage edge. The width starts from one selvage edge and ends at the other. The grain running from selvage edge to selvage edge is called the widthwise grain. The most standard width of fabric is 35 inches to 36 inches, which equals to 90 centimeters. Other common widths are 44 inches to 45 inches, which is equal to 115 centimeters, and 58 inches to 60 inches, which equals to 150 centimeters. The length of fabric is along the selvage edge. The grain running along the length is called the lengthwise grain. The length of fabric can be as long as 100 meters or more. Usually, patterns are cut along the lengthwise grain to ensure a good fall and draping of fabric. First, look at the fabric if it has a printed woven design. Analyze the print or woven design of the fabric. The center of the design will also be the center of the garment. The only time we cut along the widthwise grain is when the print or weaving pattern is in direction of the widthwise grain. There are two things to consider then. One is if there is a border we want to use, and the other is if we need to look for the center of the design. Once you are clear whether to use the fabric along the lengthwise or widthwise grain, we can start drafting. Always draft the biggest pattern piece first and continue with the next smaller one until you have all the pieces. For drafting, we fold the fabric along the straight grain and if there is a design along the center of the design. The edge of the fabric is folded over as much as the biggest fraction of a width measurement, including seam allowance and wearing ease. This could be the chest and hip of a top or pants or the bottom width of a skirt or dress. We take the example of a kameez. We will measure the chest circumference, which is 10.5 inches. We will now see the hip circumference, which is 10.25 inches here. So here we will take the chest circumference as the basis for folding the fabric, as it is the greatest measurement, and fold the plain fabric widthwise. Next, we will take the example of a fabric with design. In this case, however, the 10.5 inch mark does not come to the center of the design. So we will move the measuring tape such that the 10.5 inch mark comes to the center of the design and fold the fabric. Now let's see the case where the fabric does not have a design and the drafting instructions are such that we fold the fabric a second time along the widthwise grain. As an example, we will measure 8 inches along the selvage edge and fold the fabric lengthwise. Then measure 12 inches and fold the fabric widthwise such that the selvage edge comes as the upper layer. When aligning designs for layout, we will need more fabric because the usage of the fabric is determined by design and might leave larger waste pieces in between the pattern pieces. Especially when using stripes, checks, or other prominent designs, we need to think about how to align them horizontally and vertically throughout the garment before we can start drafting. In this session, we have learnt how to use fabric as per lengthwise or widthwise grain and to identify the various ways in which fabric is folded before drafting the pattern. Before we conclude, let's take a look at the key points. The two things to be considered for layout are the width of the fabric and the print or weaving design of the fabric. The grain running from selvage edge to selvage edge is called the widthwise grain. The grain running along the length of fabric is called the lengthwise grain. For drafting, we fold the fabric along the straight grain and if there is a design, along the center of the design. With that, we've come to the end of this session.